Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Thursday, and welcome to our brand new series, Witch Life. Each month, we're going to be focusing on a different aspect of the witch's life, and for January, we're doing a portion I'm calling The Mirror. And we're beginning with the theme of what do we want to get out of this? So it's a new year, and that means it's an opportune time to reflect, especially in preparation for a Malk, when so many of us are focused on ideas relating to purification, renewal, and just what's next? What's that next chapter? And that's really what has led to the creation of this new series. And this month, I'm encouraging my brothers and sisters in the craft to join me in taking a good old look-see in the mirror and asking ourselves very fundamental questions, beginning with, what do we want to get out of this? Because if we've been practicing any length of time at all, we understand it's one thing to be pagan, it's one thing to be a practicing pagan, and it's quite another matter to add a whole other layer on top of that and actually practice witchcraft. Because there are plenty of pagans who take their spirituality very seriously. They are diligent about doing the work. They research, they meditate, they observe pagan celebrations, they apply pagan principles in their lives, they honor their gods in a myriad of ways, and they have very rich, fulfilling spiritual lives. And of course, there are a lot of witches who do all of that, but then they take on the duties of being a witch on top of all of that. And this involves studying and practicing magic with the aim of becoming truly adept and being able to apply our magic for a myriad of purposes. And this means we're going to need to study a lot of herbal lore. We'll need to learn how to use crystals. We need to learn about animals in both the spirit animals and in their physical forms. And this also means learning, understanding, and using different techniques of magic. There's a lot of different ways to get things done. And you don't want to be a one-trick pony. That's not being an adept. And of course, also, once we get a handle on our own magical practice of starting to develop new techniques, experimenting, see if we can find different methods. Is there another way to do something? Is there an easier way to do something? And quite honestly, is there a cheaper way to do something? Because most of us are not made of money, and being able to practice economically and be able to get things done and get effective results, that's incredibly important. Because a magical life has magic infused into every single aspect of it, and from running our home, tending our gardens, taking care of our pets, taking care of ourselves, enhancing our professional endeavors, going about our hobbies, even helping enhance our relationships. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and magic is going to touch it, or at the very least affect it. Also, in addition to this, we tend to master at least one form of divination. Many people study many forms. And of course, studying symbolism, psychology, interpreting dreams, learning how to walk on both sides of the veil in a very literal sense. And that means being able to navigate the astral planes in a conscious way. And this would include, of course, building an astral temple, as well as learning how to deal with a variety of spirits, be they friendly or otherwise, and learning how to interact with the dead. And there's just a lot that goes into it. And of course, if you're a Wiccan witch, that means priesthood. And that means being ready, willing, and able to conduct various ceremonies, blessing newborn pagan children, performing rituals, whether it's for our moons, our sabbats, or other purposes, overseeing rites of passage, officiating hand fastings and hand partings, conducting funerals, engaging in spiritual counseling when called for. And one note about conducting hand fastings. When you're officiating a legal marriage, that will require satisfying the legal requirements and the state in which the wedding is to be held. And this can usually be taken care of online, usually for a very modest fee. But it's important to do that and to take on that responsibility and to make ourselves available for the community. That is part of what following the path of priesthood means. In addition to the priesthood, even if someone isn't a particularly religious witch, a lot of people still do have patron deities, and those patrons may have specific tasks assigned to the practitioner, and they might expect those tasks to get done in a timely fashion, or at the very least to represent them well, to bring their name into the world. There's a lot that goes into that. And then, as if all of this isn't enough, there's also the issue of teaching and mentoring. You never know when someone might come to you, and it doesn't mean that you have an ongoing long-term relationship with this particular student. Someone might just be new to it, encounter you on social media and ask you questions and get a little bit of guidance. And you need to have something to offer. If you're going to go around calling yourself a witch, you need to have something to offer. And this also brings up the issue of legacy. If you are not leaving a magical legacy behind you when you shed your immortal coil, then really you have been neglecting your duties. We aren't just little islands of witches. We are links in a larger chain. As long as, human beings have been able to touch the energies of magic and manipulate them and create effects with them, and into the future, to however far this goes, we're all part of that larger tradition, even if our beliefs are different, even if our techniques are different, even if our overall practices look very different, we're still part of that greater whole. So if we're not making an attempt to allow the next generation to link into us or to teach them something, or at least be available to do so, then we're not helping keep paganism alive. We're not helping keeping witchcraft alive. In fact, this neglect essentially lays the groundwork for magical knowledge and magical practices to be lost all over again. And this time it wouldn't be because of religious persecution. It would be because we left a task undone. We didn't take it seriously. We didn't try. So practicing the craft, as you can tell, and I've only scratched the surface with what's involved, but this clearly involves a great deal of study and hard work and having a sense of personal responsibility. Witches have the capacity to affect the overall landscape of life a lot more than regular people do. So it's not becoming, and it's not very helpful to be flippant about who we are and what we can do and what's involved with it. And it isn't without reason that philosophy and theology, morality and ethics are a perennial subject of debate within witchcraft. It's core to what we do and how we do it and why we do it. So, becoming a practitioner, this is not the proper realm for anyone who's lazy, for anyone who's unmotivated, or for anyone who isn't willing to become a deep thinker and wrestle with the really big questions of life. This is hardcore stuff, and it's not for everyone. However, there's no shortage of voices of people who claim the title of witch and who are happy to tell you that you don't have to do anything to be a witch. And they would be aghast and horrified at everything I just talked about, and they would decry the notion that any of it was required to be considered a legitimate practitioner. Here's the thing. Words have meaning. And practicing witchcraft is about doing, not believing, not feeling, not merely claiming a title. It's about getting something done. So if someone has an argument that there's more than one definition for what a witch is, okay, fair enough, then the next step is for people to clearly articulate what their definition is and make the case for their viewpoint, and to do so in a logical and a coherent way. Now, if the argument is that being a witch is just about being, in the sense that someone could just be born a witch, and that training and practice isn't actually required, you don't have to learn anything, then, at the very least, the question becomes, so what's the difference between a witch and a non-witch? How can you tell? If you don't have an answer for that, then you need to go back to the drawing board and either adjust your views or come up with a much better argument. But I think these disagreements about what does or does not constitute the job description of witch, it stems really from people who come to the craft for the wrong reasons. They find themselves in a situation that doesn't actually suit them. This isn't a life they're necessarily called for, but they can't bring themselves to admit it. And instead, they direct their energies to the task of persuading the practitioners who have paid their dues and who have done their due diligence, and they have done their studying, and they have done their practicing and experimentation. They've fallen down and gotten back up again, and they have done the work. It's about persuading those people that there are no requirements. It's just a feeling in your heart, and no one has to study or learn or practice anything. Just identifying as a witch should be enough, and should be enough for you. Now, I think it's worth pointing out that even if half of the energy that was put into confusing what a witch actually is was redirected into studying and practicing, then we'd have a pretty badass platoon of witches, and that would be pretty awesome. But because people haven't done that, and they've put forth their energy into excusing themselves for what they don't do, but still wanting to claim the title, the word witch, as a result, has lost its meaning. So many people just didn't want to actually become witches and take on the work. They just wanted to apply the word to themselves in order to feel special, in order to get a boost to their self-esteem. This is self-deception. And it's combined with psychological bullying, because then they have to convince people to at least pay lip service to their self-deception and thus maintain the illusion, and to call out anyone who calls us into question and to say, no, you're not inclusive, you're mean, you're cruel, you're not the arbiter of what a witch is or is not. And so it goes on. So this is why we encounter witches on the internet who try to convince others of how special they are. Because on some level, people understand that because they have claimed the word witch without doing anything to earn it, the word has become meaningless, and just claiming the word witch isn't enough anymore. It's lost its value, it's lost its impact. And because people are trying to feel special without actually earning their own self-esteem, they become addicts. They're struggling to find a way to get another fix, to maintain their illusions, to fool themselves into feeling special, to feel like they're a bright, shining star in their tribe, and to inflate a false sense of self-esteem. And this is all in an effort to avoid what the real problem was and what the original problem was: building their own character. Building character and becoming your own agent of transformation and refinement in your life and in the broader universe, that is the chief component of the great work of witchcraft, and it is the highest goal of witchcraft. So evading this, it's not just a dereliction of your duties, it's actually actively tearing yourself down. Because until you take this on, until you deal with your shadow, until you start claiming your own power, until you start doing the work, well, there's always going to be a part of your conscience that is niggling at you. And there's no way to get around that, and there's no way you can get enough reassurances, smiles, or false compliments from other people to make up for that void. It will still be there within you, so deal with the void. And this brings up the question of, do we want to be practitioners? Are we willing to take on a lifetime of work? And what do we hope to achieve by it? And it's scary to question ourselves on this fundamental level, because all of us do at one point or another have our own doubts about what are we doing? Is this really what we're called for? But we're not going to get very far in the craft, and we're not going to get very far in life if we allow our own fear to have the final vote in the decisions we make. If we do find ourselves admitting that fear is dictating our choices, it's time to step back completely and deal with that issue first. Now, I want to make it clear that experiencing fear, even severe fear, isn't the problem. What is the problem is allowing that fear to control our lives. Practicing the craft, even worshiping our gods, especially if you have a patron, this will involve confronting our fears. If we're not ready to do that, then we're not ready to be witches. So even if you are ultimately called to this path, until you deal with that fear and putting that fear in its proper place, there's going to be a limit to what you can do, and there's going to be a limit to how far you can progress. This is something that is fundamental and needs to be dealt with at the beginning. Another question we could ask ourselves is, do we love the doing or just the idea of it? There is a very aesthetically pleasing image on Pinterest and Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, other platforms of witchcraft, of living the witch life, and it's all very lovely and glamorous and adorable, and it's easy enough to get lost in that. It's easy to get lost in the aesthetics and the outward appearance. Now, this isn't to say that we can't or shouldn't create beauty in our lives, or that we can't or shouldn't enjoy our craft. Quite the opposite. But there's more than just the surface appearance involved, and it's important to keep sight of that. And if we are sharing publicly what we're doing, it shouldn't be in an effort, to get likes and therefore satisfying our vanity. It should be about bringing something of value to our community, whether it's, I tried out this spell and I had really good results with it, or I've been struggling with this idea and this is, my thought process and I want to have a conversation about it. It's about bringing something to it, because for better or for worse, social media is how our society communicates and how our spiritual community communicates. So what are we communicating? Are we communicating that we love the practice of the craft and we're wanting to really get into the deep meat of it, or are we just loving a carefully constructed image of the craft that is only skin deep? So, is being a witch who we really are, and is it what we really want to do? This is the hardest part. If we're looking in the mirror and we conclude the answer to that is no, then don't be embarrassed. Witchcraft is not for everyone. It isn't a failure to say that this isn't for me. It doesn't make you less to say, this simply just is not what I want for my life. It isn't the kind of life I want. I want something else. This doesn't mean that you can't have a spiritually fulfilling life. But what you do need to do in order to have that spiritual fulfillment is to move in a direction that's actually honest, that's in accordance with your true nature, your true goals, your true priorities, and who you really are. It will make you happier. It will put you back on track to finding where you do belong, and that is where you will be happy spiritually. But you can't get there if you don't admit that you might be in the wrong place. Now, if we're looking in the mirror and we're discovering that the answer is yes, this is what we want, warts and all, then at that point, let's get busy. We have infinite opportunities to make our lives more magical. In all reality, the only thing that's stopping us is us and our outmoded ways of thinking and just not being in the habit of doing things. So do we have the drive to do this? Do we have the fortitude to walk this road? Hopefully so. And we can build ourselves up. We're not going to go from 0 to 60 overnight, but maybe we could go from 0 to 15 and start making progress and build up speed and build up our magical muscles and really take this on and then to have that fully immersed witch life. So in order to do this, we're going to have to embrace self-honesty. I think there are a few qualities that are more important in life than self-honesty. And honestly, we witches, we can't get by without it. No matter what we're seeing in the mirror as individuals, we shouldn't shy away from looking at what's really there. Try not to superimpose your hopes or your fears, your dreams or your nightmares. Just try to see yourself as you truly are, as much as what's humanly possible, and then make your plans accordingly. So, after this initial lovely little personal reckoning, next week the series will continue and we'll be assessing our witchy strengths and our witchy weaknesses and what we can do about them and how we might start thinking about concrete ways in which we can develop. So I hope you will come back for that. If you can't wait until next week and you want to carry on the discussion, please come visit me on Discord at Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the description box below. And of course, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.